It's graduation season, and yesterday we were at our son's graduation, and a video was presented where the people were asked, what would you tell your freshman self? They were seniors, and they said, what would you tell your freshman self? This has caused a lot of thought and introspection for Jami and I, and it's something that we want to talk with you about today on the Streaking Podcast. So without further ado, let's start streaking. What is streaking and why should you do it?
Streaking is how you set up personal winning streaks. Look at who you want to be and what you need to do to become that person. This is streaking.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jami.
And we are streakers. Through 30 years of marriage and 7 children, we have learned the power of consecutive consistency or streaking.
To start streaking is simple. You just follow these 3 laws. Make it laughably simple, keep a record, and join the streaking community.
Streaking is your hidden superpower. With it, you will consistently progress and grow in whatever area of life you want.
In this podcast, Jeff and I will share all the fun, exciting, serious, solemn, wonderful parts of family, spiritual, professional, and personal life, and how streaking powers it all.
So join us in the conversation, join the movement, and start streaking today.
Here we are. Welcome back from graduation day.
Yeah, it was great. You know, I think one of the neatest moments was when our son was granted the honor of being able to present the senior gift to the school. So I guess every year at the high school that he's at, they present a senior gift. And he, with one of his peers, was able to present this senior gift. And you, Jami, turned over to me and you said, you know, to think that in 5th grade...
This was the kid that in 4th grade, I'm like, he can't read.
Right.
All the other kids can read.
And he is struggling reading.
Cannot read.
Presenting, talking, any of those things. And you said, and now here he is. And this was a very big audience. He was up on the Jumbotron. It was probably about 2,500 people. And he presented without any problem whatsoever.
He did. I cried.
And it was neat. I think you cried because it was a neat experience. It was neat to see how he now, because he was reading what it was that he had written along with his peer to present this gift to the school, and he did it flawlessly. No stutters, nothing. I mean, it was just beautiful.
And I guess I was so proud that he'd have the confidence to do that, to be able, when that has been something that has not always been his strong suit.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating. The video that they showed, it was cute. They asked all of the, not all, there's like 4 or 5 seniors on there.
Yeah.
And they asked the question, what would you tell your freshman self? And it was fun because so many of their answers are, they were things that as I listened to them, I thought, I still feel like I'm learning those things as well. Like each new stage of life, or because I'm obviously way past graduation of high school. Yet
you don't look a day over that, honey. I mean, you
know what? I'm grateful to not be. I don't want to be thought to be in high school anymore. Oh, okay. We digress.
Sorry.
The point was,
I was kind of just teasing around.
Yes.
Sorry.
The point is that it was fun to listen to their responses. So some of the responses were basically like, don't get so worried about things.
Yeah.
Everything's going to work out. It's going to be okay. So that was one of them. And I thought, I am often still telling myself that for different situations. Another one was, it goes really fast, and get involved. Put yourself out there. Find people to say hi to and be friends with, and don't be so afraid of what people are thinking of you. And I thought, another thing that I'm telling myself now still, that I'm still wanting to work through. Another one was get involved. Like, take advantage of the opportunities that are here. You only get this time of life once. You only get this opportunity to be at this stage of life once. So get involved, be a part of it proactively, like go on adventures, have fun, make friends. That was another one of them.
That was a good one. Yeah. As I thought about and listened to those things, I was thinking about what would I tell myself right from where I am right now to say 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. You know, what would I look at and say, if I were to go back and tell myself something 5 years ago, what would that be? And I look at, so 5 years ago, we were in Georgia. And we moved from Georgia to Colorado and then here to Utah. But I would be like, okay, so what is it that you would tell yourself? What would you say? And similarly, it's like things will work out. You will find a way through whatever it is that you need to go through.
I think I would tell myself to not always be looking for the destination to solve the problems, but to embrace the actual, I guess, what is it that they say? The joy is in the journey, not in the destination.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the joy comes from the work. And I feel like sometimes we look at the work and the challenge of the time of life that we're in as, I just want this part to be over so that I can, when I get to this next stage, then I won't be dealing with this part. But now I've gotten to that next stage enough times to recognize that, yeah, that thing may go away that I was stressing about, but something else replaces it.
Yeah.
So every stage of life seems to have its things that are fun and are amazing, and the things that you want to kind of escape from, that you're like, I don't like this part of it. I want this to be over. The interesting thing is oftentimes looking back on situations, the things that were enjoyable that you remember when you look back aren't the things that sometimes you would expect them to be. Oftentimes they're the little bit smaller things. They're not the big things that I feel like we're working so hard to get to. Does that make sense?
Like, what are some of the big things you're thinking that were, to put into perspective?
I guess to put it in perspective is that there are, like, sometimes you work really hard for a big vacation.
Yeah.
And that is fun, but it is also a lot of energy and effort. Sometimes, though, there's things that I look back on and I think, I just loved having all my kids home. Like having everybody come in the door after school. That kind of thing that at the time I wouldn't have noticed being something that would be so enjoyable.
Yeah.
But then when it's gone, you're like, oh, I miss all of the kids coming
is reminiscent
in the house.
right now because we're down to the last child at home.
Right.
Which we'll have him here for the next 5 years, which will be great. But that is something that you kind of miss
shift.
those. Yeah,
Yes,
it's a shift in those things.
And I think the same thing of high school. Like, what do you miss about high school? How easy it is there's always something to do. Like, there's always some club you can join or a sport that you can play or something that you can get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss that time of life when it was kind of easy to get involved. What do I not miss? It's so hard to not be self-conscious when you're in high school. I don't miss that.
That is so true. As I look at, so something else that I was thinking about in this regard, when I asked the question, what would I tell myself 5 years ago? It seems that there's not a lot that changed per se in my life in 5 years. Whereas when I was graduating high school and then going into college, those seemed to go very fast. There was a lot of changes that were happening in those periods of time. And so the question that I then asked myself is, what would I now tell myself all the way back at graduating from college? Mm-hmm. What would I say? What would I encourage myself to do? And one of the things that I thought about was I would tell myself to slow down and to look at all the opportunities that could be available, to not be fearful that this one opportunity that is being presented to you right now is the only one that's going to be presented to you and you're not going to be able to get another chance.
Right.
I would tell myself to relax. You're going to get many opportunities, but that's hard to see when the pressures of having a family, because our first baby was on the way when we graduated from school. Megan was on the way. And we had the pressure of, okay, what's the career going to be? What does that look like? And it seems to me that our children have slowed down and taken advantage of that. Whereas I don't feel like I did. I feel like I was like, okay, well, it seems like this is the job that I should take because it'll provide for our family and we'll be able to move forward with that. Whereas I look now and I would have told myself, hey, go with an area that you're highly interested in, even though it may mean that you start at a less desirable position than what you thought you would. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the basic premise that you brought up is that decisions made in fear. Like, really look at what's motivating that decision. Are you afraid? And if so, then are you just making this decision because you're like, I'm afraid that something else won't come along, so I'm just going to do this? Or evaluating that decision and really, and I think that's always a really good thing to look at, is where is my fear in this decision? And how much is it motivating the decision? And how much do I want that to be a part of the decision versus letting that go? And because it was an interesting thing, one of the things that was brought up yesterday at the graduation video was, she said, I would tell myself to not stress so much about getting the A. And I thought that was an interesting thing, because we do put a lot of pressure in school times on the grade. Like, you've got to get the grade. But the challenge is, you can spend a lot of time having fun and not get the grade and look back and be like, I wished I had spent more time getting the grade. Or you can spend a lot of time getting the grade and look back and be like, I wished I had spent more time having fun. So what that tells me is that life is meant to be this balance. And also that we're always what if we always look back and think, oh, I kind of wished I had done that. And that the real recognition, and this is something I've been trying to tell myself a lot, is that in order for us to be able to make a choice, like in order to choose something, there have to be options. And the very act of making a choice means that you picked one option and left some stuff on the table. And I feel like sometimes in our society right now, what's being communicated is, you can make a choice and not leave anything on the table. Like, if you just work hard enough and fast enough and smart enough, you won't leave anything on the table. You can choose it all. And I think that's wrong. I think the very premise of being able to choose something means you picked something. You chose to do that thing, which means you left something on the table. So the question that we ask ourselves is not this constantly looking back and thinking, oh, if I had done this choice instead, I would have been happier. It's recognizing that there isn't one choice that you can make that would give you everything. The very act and nature of making a choice means you're choosing one thing over another. It doesn't mean that you can't come back at another time and be like, okay, now this is a different time and I'm going to choose this. But I do believe strongly that this idea that we can make a choice that gives us everything is not true. The very act of choice means you're deciding. And we need to embrace that and recognize, I made a choice. If you chose to be like, I had a lot of fun and a lot of relationships and got involved in everything in high school. I didn't do as well in my grades. That was a choice I made. I did really great in my grades and I didn't do as many of these social things. That was a choice I made. I don't know that one is necessarily right and wrong. I think we have responsibility, each one of us, to look at our lives and where we want to go and what our priorities are and recognize we need to make choices. And that's part of it, is that some things, in order to make those choices, some things are going to be left behind.
That's really insightful.
I think there's some people that would very much disagree with me.
In what way?
I think there's people that look at it and be like, you can be involved in academics and sports and theater, you can do it all. And maybe there are some people that are driven by that. But I do strongly believe that in doing it all, you're still giving something up.
When I hear what you're saying, and as I listened, one of the things that I thought about in making a decision as far as which way to go, and in relation to what I was saying about what I would tell myself, I think you brought up a key principle in decision making, which is slow down, intentionally look at your choice, and ask yourself, what am I leaving on the table? In other words, it's because I have a looking at the choice and saying, well, these are all the benefits of this particular choice. And we talk about pros and cons. What is the pro? What is the con? I think that a way to see what it is that I'm choosing is to say, by choosing this course, what am I leaving behind? What am I choosing not to do? What am I choosing to leave in such a way that I'm not going to benefit from it again? So, for example, there was a point in our journey where I could go back to school, MBA school. And at that point, I was also asked to serve in a high responsibility position in church. And you and I talked about it, and we decided that I would not go back to school because of the time and energy that this new position that I was being asked to do would take.
We'd also, I think I was pregnant with our
fifth child. Yeah, you were pregnant with Lily. So pregnant with Lily, we were asked to serve in a particular position that required a lot of time and energy. And we both said, you know what, adding school to that is not going to be something that we can do at this point in time. By doing that, there were some choices that I chose and you chose, we chose together to leave behind. And as we look back on that, we now see, and this is just me, maybe not you, but I look at it and I say, with leaving that behind, I can now question that choice because I have a 20/20 view, and the pressures of that particular time are not currently on my shoulders.
Right.
And so I think that I could have done all that. When in actuality, when you step away from the entire situation, you don't know anymore the pressures that are there. Let me give another metaphor, and maybe this one will work. With having 7 children, you'd think that having the first one, with all the labor pains that come, you would not want another one because it was immensely painful. Yet you look back on it and you're like, that pain goes away. I mean, you remember the pain, but it comes to the point where you're like, no, I think we could do another one, because you forget the pain. But in the moment, there is important things that are going on that I'm considering that have to be part of the decision. And so looking back is an imperfect way to look back and say, well, I didn't really experience that pain. No, you did. You experienced that pain. It was real. It's not that it was not real. Time and situations have changed such that you could probably handle something like that again. But I think there's the key point. When that decision was made, when we made what it was that we looked at and what we left out on the table, there was a lot of pressure and pain. And now I'm looking back and I can forget that pain and think, oh, I could. But it's not that I could have done it then. It's not like you could have said, well, I'm going to have another child just right after this one.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? I know this took a little while to develop, but it's like you have to use your present circumstances to make the best decision possible. And then once you've made that decision, once you've looked at that, don't now I'm 5-10 years removed, look back and say, well, I could have done that. Not true. Absolutely not true. And I think is a detrimental way of thinking.
That's good.
That's all I got to say about that. What do you see? Are you at a loss? Or does that make sense? I mean, what did you think as I kind of went through that, thinking that out loud?
That it's hard. It's a hard thing to look back and
because I agree with you. I think that there are people that are like, no, you can do it all. But I think that what we fundamentally miss is that the present situation has a significant impact on how you decide what you're going to do going forward. So I loved how you said when they're saying, well, I should have focused more on grades. But you had all the social things that you wanted. Well, I should have focused more on social, but you got the grades that you wanted. I think that you can kind of toss those around, but when you're out of the situation and out of everything, then you can look back. Now, is looking back necessarily, is it bad to look back? I don't think it's bad to look back and evaluate and look at and say, what did I learn? And would I choose differently now based on the experience that I had? You might. And you might choose the same, but being intentional and deliberate about what those choices are and how you approach them, I think that's the key principle. It's like, yes, I knew going into this, I was going to leave some things on the table. I didn't know what all those things were. And that's why I believe you look to a mentor and to other people to be able to help get information and to say, what am I leaving on the table? You're much further down the road than me. What am I leaving on the table? Which is why I think that then prompts the question of, what would I tell myself, for example, coming out of college? Where I am now, what would I tell myself coming out of college? Mm-hmm. What would I tell myself about a career? What, in other words, has my experience taught me that I can now benefit from, or that others can benefit from because of the experience I have? And who is ahead of me from where I am right now? So if I look at where I am right now, who's ahead of me that I can say, what do I need to look for? And from your experience, what is it that you saw?
Right. I do think that is a huge thing that is beneficial, is finding a mentor, finding someone that's further down the road in the area that you're looking at, and asking questions and learning from them, and realizing, what have you learned and what can I learn from your experiences? And I think that's part of what the looking back is that any freshman that were there, now a senior can say, these don't stress so much, I guess what I was thinking is that you're exactly right, that those things are easier to say when the moment has passed.
Yeah.
And it's easier to be like, oh, I wish I had
when the
done
test's
this,
no longer on the table,
Yes.
when the final is no longer deciding your grade, when the essay is no longer
due tomorrow,
knocking down your door and due tomorrow, and I haven't written one paragraph of words yet.
So I think that the thing that as I sat there and listened to it is that maybe there is a lot of benefit in the struggle. And I think sometimes we want the struggle to go away. We don't want it to be a struggle. So what is the struggle? Do I focus on my grades, or do I get more involved and be more social? And do those have to be, you can do both, but there's always something you're giving up. That is the struggle. That is the challenge. Right. And I think that as I sat and listened and thought, I'm struggling with some of those not struggling, but I'm still in that same struggle. Different things, but still that same struggle. And I look at it and I'm like, this is where I believe that streaking was born, is recognizing that the struggle is real, and we should be okay to embrace that, because what does it mean? It means we have choice. We have choices. We have things that we can decide. So be intentional in that choice. That it was great. The whole theme. So the high school that the graduation was at, they are called the Aviators. And the principal was a pilot in the past. And so everything is themed around aviation. The school has a lot of aviation themes in it. And each year, the senior class...
The principal, the one that leads the school, she was a pilot?
Yes.
I did not realize that. Did she say that yesterday?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
She spoke about the experiences that she had learned from flying.
Wow.
And the first time that she did her solo flight.
I did not catch that at all.
We were sitting in the same graduation.
I must have been somewhere else thinking something else.
So each year, the senior class gets to pick a theme, like their theme for the year. And this seniors class theme was, it's the pilot, not the plane. So everything was centered around. And I loved that. I loved that she was teaching them that you are the pilot of your own life. Like, you've got this plane, and learning how to fly it is crucial. But truly, in the end, you're the pilot. What is she saying? Be intentional. Be intentional in the way that you live your life. Be intentional in the things that you look at. So I think that's, as we talk about these different things and these different experiences, I guess what I wanted to communicate is that I think everybody will look back on their life and think, I should have done this. I should have done. And there will be times that we will look back and be like, yes, I should have. I made a mistake there. I should have done that differently. But I also think there will be times that it's like you're looking back at hindsight, and you're forgetting that there was a lot of things going on and you made good decisions in the moment. And the idea that you could have had everything if you had made better, different decisions is a fallacy. And so embracing the idea that making decisions is the struggle, and looking at that and being like, I am the pilot of my own journey here.
Yeah.
And I want to be intentional. So what does that mean? and asking yourself those kinds of questions.
So I do remember one part of what she spoke. Obviously, I missed the entire that she's a pilot. In relation to what you were saying, she did say, know that the small, simple things that you do every day have a significant impact on your life. She brought that up as point number 2. And I immediately looked down the row at my kids who were there, and they're all streaking. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Because that's what it's about. It's the small, simple things that I do consistently every day.
And she had a great story, and we've heard this before because we've listened to other speakers speak about aviation analogies. But she said, when you're flying your plane, if you're constantly course correcting, because you may be off by 1 or 2 degrees. And if you don't correct that, you'll end up in a completely different destination over time. You end up someplace different. And that's what she was saying, is that these small things that you're doing that seem like they're not that big of a deal, it's just 1 degree, it makes a difference. If you're 1 degree off and you don't course correct, you're not going to end up in the same, in where you wanted to be.
Yeah.
And on the same note, when you course correct and it's 1 degree, recognize that means something. Like, that is what you're doing to keep yourself in the direction that you want to go so that you end up where you want to be.
Yeah.
And that's what streaking is all about, is it's giving you a methodology to have constant course correction, to constantly be looking at it and being like, okay, what 1 degree do I need to tweak here or there in order to stay on course? Because 1 degree in the moment just doesn't seem big enough to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that she said very clearly. She was like, it doesn't seem like it's going to make a difference, but it does.
It does. I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about making decisions. So this relates to what it is we're saying, but the whole idea of one of the tenets that I often repeat to myself and to others is any decision made in fear is usually the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. And I came across that. That was from experience of when I was making decisions. And I think I'll modify it just a little bit. It may not be the wrong decision, but it may not be the best decision. Mm-hmm. Any decision made in fear is not usually the best decision. It's still a decision that's made, and I still need to move forward with it. And hopefully what I'll be able to do is repair from it anything that I need to repair from a decision being made in fear. However, what I believe that communicates to myself, and this is one of the things I would say to myself way back, is don't go off fear. Look and be deliberate about what it is that you want to accomplish. And also, this is another thing I'd tell myself, don't get wrapped up in the promise of reward. Sometimes I would look at something and say, well, that's a great big reward. I'm going to go after it. And often in sales, there is what's touted as a great opportunity is actually not one, but because of the size of the company or what was said, it's like all of a sudden that becomes, well, that's $1 million opportunity. When in actuality, it's not. It was just mentioned, mm-hmm. but there isn't real evidence that would back that up. And I think that to my past self, I would say, don't go after what could be in the sense of this large, and how would I say it, opportunity that could be. More so look at what is and what can you influence now to work toward that particular opportunity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense. Tell me what I'm saying.
For me was to work for.
To work. I think it is work, isn't it?
It is work. It's the embracing that work and looking at it and saying, I'm not going to go after the thing with the big promises and just trust that because the promise is big, that the result is going to happen because of how big the promise is.
Yeah.
But truly, what you're looking at and what you're saying is evaluate the opportunity based on the amount of work that can be put into that opportunity. How can I make this actually come to fruition through the work versus just getting lured in by the big promise of amazing grandeur? And because what I hear you saying is that specifically in sales.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Working on those smaller things consistently and putting in the effort is that going to bring you to a place that's more real than this idea of this big promise, but actually has very little substance?
Yeah. I think that for me is a huge learning that I've gained through time. Mm-hmm. The work that needs to go into it. And one of the reasons why, when I started streaking, I started to look at different areas of my life and say, well, who do I want to be and what do I want to become? And now let me start doing the small, simple things that are going to get me there, which I believe is the work.
Right.
The consistency is the work. Sometimes I think I can get sidelined in thinking that it's got to be this great big grand gesture and bold move, when in actuality, it's the small and the simple. And sometimes, and I'll just be real honest with you, it is hard to believe that the small, simple things are going to get you where you want to go. I'm at a point in my life right now where I've been doing some things consistently for quite some time, and where I've seen some results, I'm still holding out faith that what I'm doing consistently in a couple of different areas are actually going to produce the result. I don't know that they will. I feel that it's the right course. I feel that I'm doing the right things, but I don't know that it will.
It's the big, the bold, the beautiful, the flashy. I look at and I think about food and I'm like, it's the difference between cotton candy and vegetables. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
The cotton candy is easier and it's bigger and it's prettier and
even the way it's made.
It's
like in this great big bowl and it's all fun to watch, and you watch it and it flies everywhere.
You get a moment of exhilaration and then it's gone.
Yeah.
Literally in your mouth it's gone. And it doesn't sustain you.
And vegetables, they stick with you.
They do, but they are not near as much fun to eat. They take much more work to cultivate.
That is
much
true. They take a lot of work.
Yeah. So it is this, but yet they are a much more sustaining element in
They're
life.
a rich source of nutrients,
right.
whereas
the
cotton candy is not a rich source of nutrients.
But we can get sucked into the lure of the cotton candy.
Yeah. Which I have before. I mean, I've gotten there. And so sticking with and doing what's deliberate now is where I'm at. Well, this has been a fun conversation.
Yep. Just straight off the cuff.
Well, we were looking at
what we're learning as we go.
What we're learning as we go. Just to recap, basically, what would you tell yourself if you were where you are in your profession now? What would you tell yourself at the beginning of your profession, or the beginning of when you were starting to look for a career? I think that's a great question to ask. Second, when considering a decision, any decision made in fear is usually not the best decision. And also, don't get lured into the promise of some big payout in the future.
Something that has a really big reward, but very little substance.
Yeah. The third thing is, when you make a choice, you're going to leave something on the table. Mm-hmm. Be deliberate about what choice you make. And finally, fourth is know that looking back and questioning your decisions in the moment is not really going to produce the, what would you say, the faith or the...
I guess I would say that differently.
Yeah, say it differently.
I would say that there is a benefit to looking back, but as you look back realistically. Don't look back with what we call the presenteeism. Like, it's easy to look back at where you are today and be like, oh,
it's a good way to say it.
I totally would have done it different. Recognize that when you're making decisions, there are pressures, there are real life things that impacted that decision. And so when you look back with some realistic glasses there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening today. We'd love to hear from you. You can email me at Jeffrey, Jeffery, at mystreaksapp.com, or
Jami, Jami, at mystreaksapp.com.
Until we talk again, we hope that you have a marvelous, fantastic, wonderful day. And as always,
keep streaking.
It's the little things that make a better